Hello, hello, hello. Happy Sunday. We are back, guys, with another episode of Chit Chat Podcast, and I'm coming to you. I know I wasn't going to do a episode today because I'm traveling, but I wanted to jump on and do an open chat session today because I think it's highly important because the month of April has hit us hard, like a whirlwind hard, a hurricane. um, Tsunami kind of affect hard when it comes to some of the things that have been happening and some of the situations that we've seen in the past week or the past 2 weeks based off of relationships and the things that are transpiring in these relationships. And so we're going to talk about that today because our episode for the month of April is April showers. For the blooming process of the April showers, because that process is going to create um, May flowers for us, right? Because we've heard that old topic, that old saying a long time ago. So I need you guys checking in. I know this is a quick chat session, and I wasn't going to actually come on today because I'm traveling, but I think it's necessary that we do because I think it's time for us to have this necessary conversation and I want us to definitely chime in today. And I want to hear what you guys think because this is something that affects all of us, not just some of us, not just males, not just females, but all of us. And especially those of us that are in relationships or in marriages and have significant others and spouses. This is an important conversation. And this is what this platform is all about. It's a platform for women who we created this safe space for us to chat all things women. And so these are important conversations that we need to be having. This is the created space for us to have these conversations and the much needed conversations that we need to have. So I need you guys checking in. I need you also sharing this live as well so that someone who needs to hear this um, will join on the conversation and chat with us as well. Because again, it's important. We know that everybody is not honest and open about the things that they're going with. So I want for us to have this conversation today. So chime in, like, share with someone. If you have some girlfriends, tag her, tell her, come on, let's get on this live and chat about these conversations and about these relationships that has transpired in the last few weeks that we've heard about that caused a big shock to a lot of us. And so these are conversations that we need to have. These conversations, they may not hit close to home to you or anything like that, but there are situations that happen more prevalent than they need to be. And so those are conversations that we need to have. So before we get started and talking, I just want you guys to take a moment and think about a time you felt uneasy in a relationship, but you stayed anyway. Think about a time that you felt uneasy in a relationship, but you stayed anyway. And if you thought about that time, here's the chit chat truth. Red flags don't mean try harder. Sometimes they mean pay attention. So this is what I need you guys to check in and let's chat about. Red flags don't mean to try harder sometimes. Sometimes they mean to pay attention. So if you took a moment to reflect on a time that you felt uneasy in a relationship, but you stayed anyway, this is the time for you to join into these conversations. So join in, like, and share so other women who may not be going through something, but they might be in a relationship. And look, hey, just because it hasn't hit your address down your street today, who to say it may not hit your address or down your street, tomorrow, next week, next year, 5 years from now. So this information is vital and important for us to have and to join in. So if I sound a little hoarse, I've been enjoying my weekend this weekend. I'm on vacation. However, I wanted to make sure that I jumped on here and had this conversation with you guys because I thought it was very important. So we're going to talk about today red flags we ignore, protecting ourselves in love, and how often we do that. How often we protect ourselves in love by ignoring the red flags. Oh my gosh. And the things that we're going to talk about in the discussion, we're going to talk about based off those relationships that you've seen around in social media this week, last week, this month. You know, just think about those red flags that's probably got ignored, and people were protecting themselves and protecting their loved ones because of love. So we're having a real conversation today, and this is just one of many, and one that we probably should have had sooner. But because the truth is, most dangerous situations don't start dangerous. They start with things we excuse, things that we overlook, or the things that we call love. Today, we are talking about the red flags we ignore and how protecting ourselves in love is not selfish. It's necessary. It is not selfish when you protect yourself in love. It is necessary. So, if we're being honest about red flags don't always look red at first. Sometimes they look like potential. We've often seen that. Sometimes they look like chemistry. Sometimes they look like he just needs some time. Oftentimes, our red flags do not look dangerous. So we would ignore them because they don't look dangerous. But when we're being honest with ourselves, these red flags look like potential. They look like chemistry. They look like, oh, he or she just needs some time. We want to see what we want to see. We fall in love with the potential and not the patterns that people show us with their behaviors and their character. Loneliness can lower standards, because some people just hate being alone. They don't like being alone. They can't stand being single. They'll jump from one relationship to the next because being alone means they got to deal with them. They got to deal with them and their issues. We normalize dysfunction from past experiences, but a lot of times we don't even try to depict why those past experiences are dysfunctional. And a lot of times we don't because people be like, who's the common denominator? You know? So we normalize dysfunction from past experiences because it becomes the norm for us. What's a red flag that you have ignored because you really like the person? We've all done it. We've all done it. What is a red flag that you've ignored because you really like the person? And don't say because they had money, because I'm trying to tell you, money is the biggest dangerous red flag that you can ignore. Because just because somebody has money, what's behind those dollars? What's behind that money? What's behind that status? So, what's a red flag you ignore because you really like the person? Let's call it out clearly because clarity sometimes saves lives, and it definitely saves our hearts. The subtle insecure comments. Yeah, absolutely. Because when those insecure comments come out, it's something they're dealing with inside. And then it becomes a thing that they try to control with you because that's what their insecurities is insecurities that they're dealing with. So some of the common red flags that we all know about: love bombing, when too much is done too fast, right? We often have seen that. The love bombing, when they just coming out strong, he or she is putting it on hard for you. It's too much too fast. They doing the most. You feel like, oh, they rocking for me. And then the possessiveness disguised as protection. Yeah. Possessiveness disguised as protection. That's one that's very dangerous. And I can tell you that's very dangerous from a standpoint from somebody who's dealt with domestic violence. Possessiveness disguised as protection. And ladies, let me make something very clear to you. A man that showcases possessiveness, um, that's not cute. It's not cute by any means because any man that is secure in himself and who he is and what he provides to his relationship or to his significant other It does not have to be disguised. It don't have to be disguised. Possessiveness does not have to be disguised as protection. That's a red flag. That's a red flag. And that's a very dangerous red flag, too. Constant jealousy. That's another red flag. Disrespect in small ways. Ugh, that's another one. The tone, the jokes, the dismissiveness, you know, and pay attention to that because sometimes that happens where people try to say little things where they'll try to belittle you or say stuff, pertaining to you, your character, your lifestyle or your weight or anything like that. Those little small little ways, tone, jokes, and dismissiveness, the disrespect in small ways, those are red flags. Those are red flags. And then the inconsistent communication. That's a red flag. Blaming you for everything. That's a red flag. That's projecting. Nobody taking ownership. When somebody definitely can't take ownership for the stuff that they do, red flag. Isolation from friends and family. That's very dangerous as well. That's a red flag that can be very dangerous because anytime that somebody tries to do the possessiveness that controls you and it pulls you in isolation away from your friends and family, that's very dangerous. And that control sometimes can lead to domestic violence or some kind of violence in that kind of manner. So pay attention to those red flags. And anger that feels unpredictable. So anger that feels unpredictable. I'm not talking about somebody does something that makes you mad and you're responding off of what they've done. Anger that feels unpredictable is coming out the blue. Like, it don't take all of that. Why are you getting mad? They just got your food order wrong. Just send it back. It's an easy fix. When you're seeing anger that feels unpredictable, those kinds of things are red flags that can be very dangerous. And if you're constantly confused, anxious, or walking on eggshells, guess what? That ain't love. That's a warning. You should not have to feel like you're confused anytime that you're in a relationship, definitely not in a marriage, anxious or walking on eggshells. That's never love. That's a warning. So, yeah, we need to be mindful of these red flags. So we talked about, we made sure that we know that our red flags needs to be clear. There's clarity in saving lives and hearts. So love bombing, doing too much, too fast, possessiveness disguises protection, constant jealousy, disrespect in small ways, tone, jokes, dismissiveness, inconsistent communication, blaming you for everything, isolation from friends and family, and anger that feels unpredictable. Definitely red flags. So we're going to talk about the emotional trap. This is what some of you guys get stuck in, the emotional trap. Because if we're being honest, you're dismissing the red flags because of the emotional trap. Because you're protecting yourself or you're protecting your loved one that you're in love with. So the emotional trap, I'm going to talk about that. Sometimes it's not that we don't see the red flag, it's that we don't want to accept what it means. And that's hard. Sometimes you're like, I know something ain't right with him. I know something ain't right with her. And we don't want to accept the red flag. We know that, we don't want to accept it, what it means, because accepting it means we got to acknowledge why am I still here? Why am I still dealing with it? Why it's not being addressed? Why I'm still emotionally attached or trapped here. Emotional attachment creates trauma bond. And a trauma bond usually is created because people have a fear of starting over. They don't like to start over. Some people don't like being alone. They don't want to change their mindset. So they'll go with what's familiar or what is accepted as opposed to what's requiring change. So, and time invested equal pressure to stay. Sometimes people it's cheaper to keep them because I've been here. We've been married for so many years. And we're going to talk about that when we speak on the Mary Mary singer whose husband just recently filed divorce. And we know the time invested that she and her husband had and she's had in that marriage based off the multiple, infidelity situations that he placed her in. And he just recently filed for divorce. So we're going to talk about that and see, get you guys' opinion on that because that has to be heavy. That has to be very heavy. The emotional trap when you invested time and you have the pressure to stay because what it looks like to society, what it looks like to other people, the fear of starting over. We got kids together. We waiting on the kids to grow up. Or we've been together for umpteen years. I've known this person my whole life, kind of thing. It never excused. It never excused disrespect. It never excused the red flags that causes dismissiveness and causes opportunity for disrespect to happen. So none of that is excusable for all those means. We have to identify what means is keeping me trapped or keeping me staying here and why I'm so invested where there's trauma, where there's toxicity, where there's confusion, there's anxiety, and there's no peace. And then we're going to talk about when love becomes unsafe. Now, this is what really hits home for me because I can't stand a situation when love becomes unsafe. You know, handle this gently because I don't want people to get in their feelings when we talking about this kind of stuff because some people have different opinions or whatever. But I want us to have this conversation and respect each other's opinions and honesty about how they feel about these certain situations and these social media relationships that we're going to discuss today. So, not all unhealthy relationships become dangerous, but many dangerous ones start as unhealthy and ignored. Not all unhealthy relationships become dangerous, but many of the dangerous ones start as unhealthy and ignored. And what you mean by that? Easily. Escalation over time, control turning into fear, losing your voice in a relationship. The worst thing you can do as a person and especially as a woman, is lose your voice and lose yourself in a relationship. Losing your voice and losing yourself in a relationship is, don't ever allow yourself to do that. And then feeling unsafe, expressing yourself. That again goes back to the walking on eggshells. You should never feel like you got to walk on eggshells or have anxiety when it comes to trying to express yourself. That's important. That's important in all relationships and the things that you need to be doing. So we need to be mindful of that. I'm trying to keep this propped up. I don't have my tripod from home because I'm not at home. So your body will often recognize danger before your mind is ready to accept it. Our body keeps the count. Our body keeps the count when our body undergoes stress and our body undergoes anxiety, anger, and all the emotions that we deal with. Our body recognizes danger before our mind is ready to accept it. When you having panic attacks and headaches and different things going on with your body and your body is responding to that, it's because your body is recognizing the danger before your mind is ready to accept it. That's why you have to know when protecting yourself in love is important and it's vital. Protection it's not just physical, it's emotional, it's mental, and it's definitely spiritual. You have to sometimes trust your gut. We call it your gut, but it's your intuition. Trust your intuition. Don't override that. Don't be like, nah, I might just be overthinking it. Trust your gut. Trust your intuition. Don't override it. Pay attention to the patterns that you're seeing and dealing with consistently. And then maintain your independence. You got to maintain your independence outside of that relationship. I'm going to try to hold this. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to hold this because it's going to fall. But, try to maintain your independence outside of the relationship. Ha- Be your own voice, be your own person, because sometimes we lose ourselves in trying to be everything we need to be for that person, or for that person to accept us for, oh, he he wants me to be his peace. But is he creating peaceful environments for you to be his peace? A lot of times people are asking for things in relationships that they're not even providing. How can you provide or ask for peace when you're not providing an atmosphere for peace? You provide an atmosphere that somebody got to question things. They got to see what is what, because you moving and doing things wrong. Your character and your behavior is dishonorable and disrespectful, but you want peace. So we have to be mindful that, when we're asking for certain things in a relationship, we got to be able to provide that. We can't ask for peace when we're not giving peace. So protection isn't just physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, and it's definitely mental. Because, you got to trust your intuition on some of these things. Your gut feeling would tell you. Your body keeps account. When your body is undergoing so much stress and anxiety and different things, it's gonna tell you. You're gonna have all kind of stuff going on with your body. Your nervous system will alarm you. This is going on, and this is not normal. Maintain your independence is important, because when it's time for you to step away, or if you have a need to step away from a situation, you have your independence. You're not sitting up there like, oh, I can't live my life because, my husband, took care of everything. He took care of me, and took care of everything, and he did everything for me. Or my significant other, he had all the money, and we did this and all that kind of stuff. Mm-mm. Maintain your independence. So any given point that you can do those things on your own. Look, I have always been in a place where when I want somebody in my life, it's because I want them in my life. It's never a need. You can trust and believe that. It's never a need. When I need somebody, gotta place that person in my life for a need. But I have been in great positions where anytime that I've been dealing with somebody on a relationship, it's always been a want, because I've always maintained my independence. Because if that person decides to leave tomorrow, guess what? I, it, one monkey don't stop no show. I'm still going on vacations. I'm still doing the things I want. I still have a life. I'm still enjoying me and all those kind of things. You have to maintain your independence and have a life outside of that, because that's part of a control and manipulation thing. People will utilize that. Like, oh, you can't survive outside of me. You can't survive. How you gonna establish this? How you gonna run a business? How you gonna do this? You know, you don't know anything about investing. You don't know anything about this, that, and other. And then, and won't try to show you any of those things, because they want to hinder you. They want to make sure you don't maintain your independence. That's why you have to set boundaries early and watch how they're respected as well. Because some people will try to test your boundaries. Everybody don't like boundaries. They're gonna try to test them. They're gonna try to cross them. They're gonna try to test them and see what they can do and what they can get away with. Don't ignore discomfort just to keep the peace. Never ignore discomfort just to keep the peace. If it's discomforting to you, don't ignore it. Your body will let you know, hey, it's gonna ring an alarm for you. Don't ignore discomfort just to keep the peace. Now you walking on eggshells, worried about saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing because you don't want to set somebody off. That's not the kind of life we need to be living. So what is a red flag that you feel like you would never ignore again? I know that there are some red flags that we've already discussed earlier that I mentioned. What are some red flags that you feel like you would never ignore again? What are some red flags that you feel like that you would never ignore again? We mentioned some red flags already. The constant jealousy, the love bombing, the possessiveness disguised as protection. So, what are some red flags that you feel like you would never ignore again? I think one for me, one of the red flags I think for me is a person's mental health um, being a concern and how they're dealing with it, because there's people who have mental health issues like depression or PTSD, and they're they're having therapy, like they need to be and all of that, and that's healthy. But there's people out there that's in denial, that's walking with a mask on, it's showing people one way, and they're like one incident away from unraveling. And that's not good, because at any given moment, that person can pop off or go off because they've been pretending. When you're a person that has to pretend for so long and feel like, anger, your anger is unpredictable because you try and portray a life that you're not able to portray, but you're playing a part so you can try to fool other people. You know how miserable that could be? Mentally draining that will be? People have to know when to say, "Hey, I can't let this be a problem for me. I got to protect myself and I got to get the necessary help." So I don't paint red flags white anymore. That's one of the red flags that you know, that I'm never painting red flags white. When I see a red flag, it's a red flag. I'm not giving benefit of the doubt. A red flag is a red flag. I'm not painting a red flag white. So if you have a red flag, what is a red flag that you never would ignore again? And mine is, I'm not painting any red flags white. I'm going to acknowledge those red flags, and we're going to talk about those red flags, and we're going to address it. And then I'm going to exit this, expeditiously. So here's another engaging question. What does emotional safety look like to you? What is that to you? A lot of time we're talking about emotional availability, how we need our uh, partners to be emotional available, having emotional intelligence. What does emotional safety looks like to you? What does that look like? Because that's important. A lot of people don't even know what that looks like to them. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, what does emotional safety look like to me in the relationship I was in, I wouldn't have been able to answer that for you. But today, knowing I know that I'm never painting red flags white, emotional safety looks different to me, and I can recognize it because any given moment that you know, I see an issue or a problem, I'm addressing it. And so, and based off when I address it, the response and the behavior I get from addressing a situation that concerns me, that's what's going to provide my emotional safety. If I'm if I'm getting, issues because I'm addressing emotional safety, or if I'm getting issues because I'm addressing something, then we have a problem. Emotional safety is triggered right there because if people don't allow you to address situations, your boundaries, or anything, communicating some issues or things that concerns them, and they make it an issue about you and your concerns, that's a red flag. And that's a red flag that triggers the point that you don't have emotional safety either. Because now that anxiety is being triggered or projected upon you. Why? Oh, now I can't ask that question, you know. So And we have to be mindful because some people will play that game on you if they know certain things. Oh, if I make her feel guilty or if I make him feel guilty about certain things, then she's gonna pull back and then I can do whatever then, or I can, go do this and we can go do this and I don't have to answer no questions. There don't have to be no discussion about the previous argument, all those kind of things. That's not providing emotional safety. So be mindful of that. What does your emotional safety look like to you? And so here's another question. Um, how do we teach women to choose themselves sooner? How do we choose women to choose yourself sooner? And women, ladies, this is it. This is important. Sometimes we stay way too long. And going back to talk about Tina from Mary Mary, sometimes we stay way too long and we stay way beyond the time that we need to. And ladies, let me give you a chit chat truth. You got to get up from the table when love is no longer being served. I don't care how much you love that person, but when you know that love is no longer being served, you have to get up from that table. There's nothing else you can get from that table to satisfy your appetite. Because at the end of the day, hurt and heartbreak is going to happen. And oftentimes it does. How do we teach women to choose themselves sooner? And I think one of the ways to teach you to choose yourself sooner is maintaining your independence. When you maintain your independence, it's easy for you to choose yourself sooner. If if my partner decides to walk away from me, I'm good in either way. You know, I'm not. Will I be hurt, heartbroken? Yes, but my life will go on. So you got to be in a state of mind like that. I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing my peace. I'm choosing my sanity. I'm choosing my self-worth, you know, because there's people out there doing things that is crossing boundaries, that's disrespecting you as a person, disrespecting your self-worth, all of that. And you got to choose when to choose yourself sooner. You got to know when to walk away when love is no longer being served. You got to know when to walk away when emotional safety is not available, it's not there. And I want to ask this question as well. Have you ever mistaken love, ever mistaken control for love? Now, this is very important. And sometimes this is important to ask our teens too, because I started out as a teen with domestic violence, you know. So, my one of my boyfriends, teen boyfriends. So this is why I'm saying this because it goes all the way to teens. Y'all don't know how many teens are dealing with domestic violence situations. They may not be to the extent that we're reading about in social media right now, but it's too much. It's too much. When any person is deciding to put their hands on another person, it's too much. It's too much. Have you ever mistaken control for love? And sometimes people can do that. Oh, he's so jealous. That's so cute. Girl, he be acting so crazy. That's not cute. That's control. That's manipulation. And ain't nothing cute about that because it's not gonna get better. It's just gonna get worse. We gotta stop thinking that certain things are cute when it comes to control and manipulation, because none of that equates to love. Red flags don't always look red. Sometimes they look like love. They look like attention. They look like, oh, he just loved me too much. He just cared too much. Girl, he loved himself to me, or she loved herself to me. Mm-mm. But if you're confused more than you're secure, and if you're anxious more than you're at peace, it's not love. It's a warning. That's not love, it's a warning. And I'm gonna say that one more time. Sometimes we look at love and attention, or he just care or she just cares too much. But if you are confused more than you are secure, if you are confused more than you are secure, if you are anxious more than you're at peace, it's not love. That's a warning. Your body will trigger that and tell you real quick. Your nervous system should be alarming you all the time when stuff like that is happening. We have to protect ourselves when it comes to love now. We are ignoring way too many red flags. This is a conversation every woman needs. So we're going to pull up the Tina Campbell situation. And we're going to talk about that for a little bit, and don't no disrespect anyone in privacy to their situation in their marriage. But we're gonna talk about it. I mean, there are a couple that celebrity couple that is in the news. So, because we know it's already trending and in the news, we're gonna discuss it. So, Jada, if you can pull up the Tina Campbell. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we talked about Tina Campbell. I mentioned her earlier on, and we talked about how her husband, in the news recently, her husband has filed for divorce from her, and in probably the last 3 to 4 years, it might be a little bit longer than that. She was dealing with a very publicly infidelity situation in her marriage, and it was a tough time for her. And one of the things that I remember her saying in a video on when her and her sister had their reality show, I remember her saying to her sister, like, you know, she don't forgave and forgave and forgave, you know, and because she was listening to people and family and everybody, they was telling her to forgive, you know, because they're Christian people. Forgive, love, work on your marriage, fix it, make things work. And every time she felt like she was doing that, she was getting knocked back down because there was another infidelity situation come up or something else would pop up. And she just felt like, how many times are you gonna do this to me? Man, you got me out here looking like a fool. I'm out here trying to trust God and work on my marriage and all these things. She was very, if you go back and see and search that video, she was very emotional about that. You can really feel her pain and emotions from that. And I remember that video like yesterday. And then when I seen the news article that popped up and said that he had filed for divorce, not her, he had filed for divorce or whatever. Um, I wanted to bring it to our conversation. Is is this a situation where you felt like someone has stayed way too long past a situation, or do you give benefit of the doubt of two people working towards trying to make something work, and then it just got to a point where it didn't work? So, because we don't know all the details. It could have been a point of exhaustion. Of we've exhausted all possibilities. We've tried counseling. We've tried to stick it out, make it work. But the hurt and the betrayal sometimes be so deep that it's hard to get over that, and it's hard to forget it. You can forgive stuff, but sometimes it's hard to forget it because there's things, and sometimes there's things that will um, trigger you to not forget it. Because sometimes people, when they have infidelity situations, sometimes it creates human beings. And those are definitely situations that will cause you not to forget the betrayal or whatever, because, you know, that's a constant reminder. So I just want to see, like, what are you guys thinking? Do you think it was a situation where you felt like, girl, you stayed long enough, way longer than you should have? Or are we applauding her for, staying to make the effort to make her marriage work, you know, despite all the multiple, betrayals and infidelity situations. So, and then also it could just be sometimes, and I gotta be honest and play, advocate here. Sometimes it can be forgiveness has been given, but because we don't forget, that's still being held over the person's head, and they can't never live that down. Like, even though things might get better or whatever in the relationship, things might get better in situations, with family, friends, or whatever, but, it's never lived down. Like, you remember you remember you used it, because sometimes we do that. Sometimes we do that. Sometimes we'll say, "Hey, I've forgiven," but we haven't forgot. And sometimes because we haven't forgotten, in the heat of a moment, in the heat of an argument, that'll come up, be like, after all you don't done kind of thing. So those things could come up. And so those things can trigger the person who's trying to make things right, who's trying to say, I know I messed up. So I'm trying to be right, but I don't need you to, beat me over the head with it. Give me the opportunity to make things right. And if we're as people don't give people that opportunity to make it right, if we decide we're going to stay and make things right, we got to be fair and say, hey, it's a clean slate. I gotta, we're gonna make things right. I gotta forget. I can't bring up the old stuff because we're reliving that. We're reliving that hurt. We're reliving that pain. We're reliving the things that triggered us, that, whatever the case may be. And that's difficult. That is difficult, especially when you've had more than one betrayal. It's difficult for people. So, so my hope is that throughout this situation that she finds the peace necessary that she needs because she's been honest and transparent. When she was going through her ordeal, she was mad, she was angry, and rightfully so. So, we have to make sure that these are real life situations. These are not movie scenarios. These are not stuff that people don't wrote in a book. These are real life situations and scenarios in people real lives. And so we got to make sure that we are detailing the information like it needs to be told, and then plus given the opportunity. If we're going to give the grounds to say, hey, reconciliation is here, then, do the necessary work, stick with it, but both parties have to be involved with that. It can't be one sided. It can never be one sided. Never. So, but, you know, you have all the stuff that, that starts out going well. People they start checking in. Anytime that cheating or infidelity has happened in a relationship or a marriage, you'll start getting, you know, the texting all day or the calls all day just to check in and make sure everything is good. That that person has some security knowing, where you are, what you're doing, and have that safety, the emotional safety that they need where they're not anxious or having anxiety, speculating what you're doing or what you could be doing, or who you're doing it with, you know, um, and because if not, then it's going to turn into the who were you with? You've been gone all day. You've been gone half of a day, kind of thing. And so all the explaining what happened. So that stuff gets exhausting. It gets really exhausting. And so we have to recognize when progression sometimes leads us to walking away or saying we done everything we needed to do, and the best, you know, action right now is for us to walk away from each other. Uh, but you should never have to choose between love and your peace. That should never be an option. You should never have to choose between love and your peace. Never. So our final talk is going to go on. I hate this. I I don't want to say I hate it, but this is a sad moment because these three individuals are no longer here. And so it would just make me sad thinking about it. These three individuals are no longer here. So our prayers from Chit Chat Podcast go out to their families and to their loved ones, family and friends, because when you're dealing with a situation where people who's supposed to provide you that emotional safety, that safety in your home, that safety in a place when you're with them, and they don't, that's reckless. That's scary. That's a red flag. That's the red flags that we're talking about when we're looking at, possessiveness, you know, over control. Like you can't paint these red flags white. You got to see it as what it is. And you should never choose between love and your peace, regardless. I don't care if I had 10 kids with somebody. I'm never going to choose, between love and my peace. If my peace and how I am as a person mentally, physically, and spiritually is fragmented, I'm going to choose me always. Because at the end of the day, you cannot allow yourself to be in a place where you're emotionally trapped in a situation. And because you're emotionally trapped in a situation, because you don't know how to choose between peace and love, and now you're in a situation where that person has now compromised your life and their life, or compromised your life. Because we're at a point where we're having a hard time choosing between ourself and love, and choosing between ourself and peace, love and peace. You got to know when to choose you. You got to know when you're in a relationship where you feel safe. Or do I feel safe in this relationship? Or do I just feel attached? Do I feel love in this relationship? Or do I just feel attached? Am I anxious in this relationship, or is this, a form of love? We got to know those difference. We got to know when our peace has been compromised, when our anxiety is off the roofs. We got to know when to walk away. We got to know when to choose us. Because the sad part about it, when we don't have that choice or we don't make that choice, it will be made for us. And the sad part about it, you don't want it to be made for you in this sad kind of way. If no one has told you this before, you are allowed to walk away from anything that disturbs your peace, even if you love them. You are allowed to walk away from anything that disturbs your peace, even if you love them. There's a lot of people have to walk away from people they love because them people, they already know there's no peace there. And anything that disturbs your peace, you are allowed to walk away because you're choosing you. You're choosing you. You're deciding to choose you physically, spiritually, and emotionally. You cannot have the mental capacity staying somewhere longer than you need to, because we're seeing situations now where people have stayed longer than they needed to, and it has cost them. It has cost them a lot. It's cost them their lives. Know when to walk away and anything that disturbs your peace, you have every walk, every every means to walk away. Anything, anything, any person, place, or thing that disturbs your peace, even if you love them. So that's all I have for you guys today. I know it's one of those serious topics and it's all kind of, emotional and very, very, very it's very emotional because it's just bothered me. I feel like April has been full of April showers. And but we can allow this to be a moment that we alert ourselves to be mindful of red flags, to be mindful that we don't have to um confuse, love uh, and attachment, knowing that when our peace is being disturbed, when we need to walk away. Because at the end of the day, you are important. No one, you are allowed to walk away from anything that disturbs your peace. And that's even if you love them. So let that be a lesson for you moving forward. Real love doesn't require you to shrink. It doesn't require you to suffer or to silence yourself. Protecting yourself in love doesn't make you difficult. It makes you wise. And if something feels off, don't wait for proof. Trust your gut, trust your intuition. Your peace is enough reason to walk away. Your peace is enough reason to walk away. If something feels off, don't wait for the proof. Walk away. You are too important to your family and your friends for us to have to post a picture or someone to post a notification about you somewhere. Protecting yourself in love doesn't make you difficult. It makes you wise. And I need you guys to be wise because we might be seeing a whole lot of April showers right now, but there's going to be a time where the Mayflowers are going to bloom in. And that's the opportunity us for to grow from the mistakes we made, grow from the things that we've learned from. And even if you're dealing with something in part of this, seek the necessary resources to get help. Don't suffer in silence. Know when to walk away, even if you love that person. And always get up from the table when love is no longer being served. So that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys for being patient with my impromptu while I'm on vacation. I will be back this week. And so when I come out this week, we'll have upcoming the Dr. Love. Our Dr. Love will be joining us for next Sunday's episode. We will finish our April showers episodes as we are providing you information pertaining to love and how to bloom in the process of the things that are showering on in our lives, the things that we're dealing with when it comes to love, relationships, healing, and overcoming and becoming. So join us next Sunday live for that with our own Mr. Juan Lee, who we affectionately call our Dr. Love. So until then, thank you guys for tuning in this Sunday. I wish you guys a fantastic week this week. Have a great day on purpose, and I will see you guys next week. Have a good one. Bye.